So guys, I want to do another tough video, and I want to talk about, actually one that's actually more challenging. And I want to talk about the time my father ran for governor of Connecticut, and he did a commercial mentioning that me and my brothers have autism and we're all black. And what I want to say about this is that, like my dad was running for governor of Connecticut in 2016. And I'm not going to mention his name, but the thing about it was that he did a bunch of commercials. And one of his commercials was talking about, like special education, mentioning that he has kids that have autism. And he did show, some of our, like baby pictures and all that stuff. And then also, like when he said, like, I had kids suffering from autism, he kind of just jerked his head and he was raising his eyebrows. Because I know, like, at that time, I was spending a lot of time away from family. So I think that I joke with myself and I say, like, maybe he forgot that he had 3 sons. Or maybe, part of his ego is really just being like, acting like, that's something he can use against us, or that's something he can kind of use as a bit of a put down and other things like that. And it was definitely, very hurtful to me. And it really got to me so much that, when they had the 48-hour film project in the New Haven competition, that's kind of when I spoke on stage and I talked about suicide and depression, because I felt very hurt and humiliated by what my father said, that I made a self-destructive choice to hurt my film career. But I also felt like at that time I was really working hard. I was doing the right thing. I was making a lot of positive changes in my life. And I felt like no matter what, people could disrespect me or family could talk about my mental health issues or inaccurately talk about it and just do other things. And it seemed like, what I've said in another video about how one issue that happens in a lot of parental and child relationships is the parent demands respect and professionalism from the child, but children don't get that in return, really. So you're kind of almost teaching, what we see like in Everybody Hates Chris. Chris is forced to wash the dishes, but he's doing that because that's easiest for his mom, is to like put all that on him. And then if he argues, you get knocked across the face, really. It teaches that respect is one way, really. But definitely that's what it was with me, that I felt like, respect was kind of one way with my family. But ultimately, we should not ruin our lives or go down a bad path because somebody says something very hurtful to us. So I do want to mention a couple of things that, first of all, I don't know what I have. I've actually had counselors say that I may have antisocial disorder. I've had counselors say that I may be autistic. But the truth about me is that, I was adopted out of an abuse and neglect situation. And the story was that my brother was autistic. Some people say that what happened was my dad couldn't adopt me because he was gay. So what he did was that he and his lawyer worked very hard to put a mental illness label on top of me, because I was also behind socially and I was also behind in my speech and other patterns, really. But when you come from a neglect and abuse situation, and when you come from foster care where nobody really cares about you, you're just there to make, help get that, foster care paycheck from the government. It's not really mental illness. It's nature versus nurture, which is the environment makes you mentally ill. The environment has an impact on your mental health, really. So there was a lot of that as well, where it's like the environment that I grew in had an impact on my mental health. And that's kind of how I was, that's what, the story was, really. And that's what I believe, was that, my brother had mental health issues. They said, okay, it's genetic. Also, because your mother had mental health issues, therefore you have it. And then not looking at the environment that I was in. I grew up in a very, very strict household. I grew up with assignments like you have to know the name of all 30 kids in your classroom, or else no TV, no Nintendo. I've seen many things as a kid where my brother was overwhelmed by the expectations my parents had for him, so he ran out of the house. My dad grabbed him and pulled him back in the house. I grew up with, like, things like, if I didn't keep my desk organized as a kid, my teacher would flip over my desk and expect me to pick up things. I grew up with, lying a lot because my dad would yell, scream, and curse, or sometimes slap me if I misbehaved. And then sometimes, when I was a kid, my dad would punch a wall or grab my face if I ever did not make eye contact with him. So obviously, when you're yelling and berating all the time, really, you're not going to look people in the eyes, really, or you're not going to have a kid who does that because you're so used to, objectifying them or other things. So there was emotional abuse. And I used to lie a lot as a kid because what happened was that my parents would flip out over homework, or it's almost like you're gonna get smacked either way, really. So sometimes, as I said, it's really the environment that I grew up in. And also too, when I was in high school, I had an emotional breakdown because I dealt with a lot of bullying in middle school. And I was also told that my biological mother did very severe abuse and neglect. Descriptively, what she did to my brother. She took a glass bottle and smashed it across his face. Whenever I was dirty and covered in, my own body waste and filth, she ignored me. And that has a huge impact. And I was kind of told adults have problems too. You need to forgive and move on. And maybe, I become a black father who is there for my children. I become like Jules from Everybody Hates Chris, really. I become a black man that's like, I'm going to be there for my black babies and my black wife, really. So that's always kind of been the role, really. And then after college, I suffered from a lot of PTSD. I was almost murdered by the police. I struggled with suicidal thoughts. I had a manager that was actually making fun of the fact that I was almost murdered by the police. I dealt with a lot of expectations to be successful, and whenever I complained, I was told that I was like a 9-year-old little girl, and my parents were very insensitive about it. I had a mental breakdown. I hung out with a bad crowd. I've got myself in trouble. And then also the other thing too is that I lived with a brother with mental health issues. He would walk around the house with an erect penis. He would wear a codpiece and say things like, I'm wearing a codpiece because I'm afraid I'm going to projectile ejaculate in your face, really. And I've shared some things to my parents, and they do nothing about it, really. So you look at a lot of situations that I've been through. I've been through a lot of traumatic experiences. I also went to college where it was a very racist environment, and the mentality was that I was a black kid, and black kids are supposed to write about their past and being proud black men, really. Like, talk about how great it is to be a black guy during the Obama era and all that stuff, So I was always kind of subjected to token minority stereotypes. So the other thing is that I dealt with workplace bullying. I've dealt with sexual harassment many times. And I worked with a therapist and my father. They both had a mentality of, oh, well, you know what, you need to get over it. Stop being like a 9-year-old little girl, and you actually just have to work on getting a better job, move out of your brother's place, maybe settle down, have a family. Oh, you're a loser because you have a driving anxiety. Like, that's a mix between some things my therapist has said and some things my father has said. But I really think when you look at my mental health issues and everything that I'm sharing with you guys, that the big thing about me is, possible antisocial disorder, possible some developmental delay because of the environments that I've been in. I've lived in environments where a lot of people in my life have taken advantage of me. A lot of people in my environment have other forms of antisocial disorder, like I talked about with my brother, or I've shared about my father, where he grew up abused. So sometimes when people are abused, they don't develop a lot of empathy, really. So it's almost like some sociopathic behavior because of how I was raised. And then, as I said, if you have an older brother with mental health issues walking around naked with an erect penis, and his penis is arcing up and he's standing on his tippy toes, like, and other things like that, that does have an impact on you. And I think that a lot of times, that's what I grew up with. Nobody cares about your mental health. Nobody cares about how you're hurting inside. We only care about your results, really. So you can kind of understand, why a person like me went down a path of self-destruction. And then whenever I get in trouble, it always seems to be that the autism card and other cards get brought up, really. So I think the first part of it is not having a father that says, okay, I got to look at the full picture of this kid. A lot of the mental health issues that I struggled with was because there's been under acknowledgement of other people's behavior. There's been under acknowledgement of his impact on me. There's been under acknowledgement of how my brother treated me. There's under acknowledgement of the fact that I was almost murdered by the police, that I've worked in many jobs where I've been sexually harassed. I've had people tail their penises in front of me, where I've almost been assaulted or killed a couple of times. I almost died in a car crash a few years ago because some fucking, I'm not going to say the word, but person hit me. He got out of the car, he was shaking his hand, and then my dad was mad that I wanted to file a lawsuit against him because he said, oh, well, you're just mad because this person wasn't sorry. So there always like was that thing with me that, I did grow up in a very antisocial family. And like I said, I got to get up every once in a while when I talk to you guys, because my asshole brother is actually going to like come in here, open the door, cook, and disrupt my video because he doesn't care really. So I grew up with a lot of antisocial, in a very antisocial family, very much like, I don't give a fuck about you. I care about your results. You're a burden and other things like that, so that's the big thing about my mental health. It's just like I grew up with people who are very 50-50. They care in certain ways, and in certain ways they don't care. I know that's, with human beings, but there are people who are more patient and more respectful and more kind, and I did not grow up with that. So when it comes to my father and his commercial, it was definitely a huge misrepresentation about mental health, really. And it's also maybe a huge misrepresentation of how, he doesn't acknowledge that he's had definitely a huge impact on me. And I also will say that, it's definitely, as I said, my grandmother, when she died, she has Alzheimer's. And there was a story that my dad told her that my dog passed away, and she was crying and upset about it. And then she forgot a few minutes later, and then he told her again, then he told her again and again and again. So what would happen if I put the camera and I did a documentary about that, because I'm a filmmaker? What would happen if I did a 48-hour film project and I said that's actually Grandma Madeline, God rest her soul, and all that? There's always like a sense, I think, of how it seems like, whenever I show respect and disrespect, that gets criticized. But whenever my parents disrespect me or talk about my mental health issues, or sometimes my dad would say, oh, my kids are stupid, they can't learn, and chuckling, I'm not allowed to share how I feel, really. So, definitely when my father did that, that really hurt me deeply. I felt very embarrassed. I felt like I couldn't be a filmmaker or be successful because I don't want to be known as like the Rain Man or the Forrest Gump type of filmmaker. It was a very personal thing. It was something that should have been kept private. And then also by the full story I'm telling you guys is that my mental health issues really came from, living in a very antisocial, feelings don't come first, being looked at as a burden, expectations and results first, your feelings second type of environment. So that has an impact on somebody. That can inspire someone to be better. That can inspire somebody to not stand up for themselves. And then that can inspire somebody to be a sociopath. And you kind of look at how I turn out, like how I do a lot of videos talking about issues that I've had with my family, and to also educate people not to be, the same type of inconsiderate type of way, really. So, how we treat people is important, and what we say publicly about people is important, So definitely it had a very bad impact on my life for my father to share that. So, you always think about like, your family, and also too, it makes you look bad as well. Oh, well, I just have to talk about my relative's mental health issues. I have to go on television and do that. It makes you look bad. It makes you look objectifying. So since I don't have that much time today, this is the first part of my video. It was not right for him to do that. It's not right for him act smug and gloating. And, my dad may have some narcissism and some antisocial issues as well, really. But he wouldn't like it if I was being a filmmaker and saying this is what I had to overcome and all that, really. So, don't objectify your children because they have mental health issues. It's a very private thing. It's a very embarrassing thing. There's not a lot of people who understand that, it can be also very hurtful. And there's people like my parents who don't understand like a lot of discrimination and other things that I've been through because I've had mental health issues. People think I'm naive or too stupid to realize that I'm being insulted, or being around people with more severe mental health issues and having a form of antisocial disorder and using that against me, or people manipulating me and treating me like I'm stupid or I can be taken advantage of because of mental health issues. So, get to know people, don't objectify people.